point that came out is that when we look at associations, and we generally talk association for research, that's what we approach to. But I think we should be looking at a more holistic, much more well-rounded association. Some of the examples that you brought in about speakers coming in, about students getting involved. So I think the note on which I would like to start is that if you're talking of industry relationship becomes important. And two of the dons here of relationships, Jag and VK. How do we actually leverage that relationship? And we all know that relationships take time to mature. It takes time to build relationships, and it takes a lot to maintain them. That's something which is there. What I'm going to share with you is the experience that I've had over the last 12, 13 years with the center of retail that we have, and Vivek was the one who we partnered, started at that time. And we literally have built it, what you call as case by case, paper by paper, brick by brick, as you go, although we don't have a building of the center, and we decided not to have the building of the center actually. In fact, we decided not to have any administrative setup at all to run the center. Because otherwise, what we found is that when you create this kind of a center, ownership starts coming in, who owns what, spaces get created, and then you have issues which sometimes go out of hand. So we said we'll keep it completely non-physical. Whosoever wants to work in this area, so 9 of our faculty actually work in this area, in the retail sector. And one of the biggest advantages that we have is that this is not just marketing. Although majority of us are marketing, and we call it a market focus, but among us, we cover end-to-end of retail business. So we have somebody who is also a supply chain or buying expert, to somebody who is a POS data expert, to somebody who is a branding expert, who is a pricing expert. He used to do a lot of POS-based work in that. And there are people in strategy and loyalty programs, format choices, shopping, all those. So you bring in a lot of, which means like therefore when we talk to any company saying that what is it that we bring to table, we are not talking research, we are taking value chain. That here we are, that we can actually work with you on the entire value chain with you, whichever part that you like to wish to work on. That's something so that's a resource that I think all of us have. It's something that nothing new, all of us have it. How do we present it as just a project to whether do we have something which actually matches the requirement of the customer? And one of the things that I've learned over years is that we talk about the value chain. If we have the capability to touch different parts of the value chain, opportunity to collaborate increases, and the chances of actually talking to people increases. and this experience that Vivek and we all started, in 10 years we would have done work for about 35 million rupees so far. Different projects, and which has emanated into consulting assignments, research assignments, training programs. All that has come because of the association that we have had. Publications also have come. And most of it is where we have been able to talk to companies that they have allowed us to publish the work out of this. That's something which is there. However, with some caveat. So that's something which is there. Of course, there have also been cases where we have refused association because we are not allowed to do that. That's something which is what we did. So the point that comes is not about accepting or rejecting. Point is that what is the objective of this particular association is what one starts with. And saying that whatever we do has to be good for the world. It's not for the company as such. It's not for the institute or for the center. Are we looking at something which is a much larger picture which we present to the client? And in most cases, I have not come across anybody who says, no, we will not look at it. Except in cases where they would like to make the research proprietary, where they would like to see that since we are funding it, we will like to proprietary. And we have refused that. That's something that we have done that. Leading companies have come to us and with these conditions, and we have refused that work. That's something which is there. To that extent, it might have limited the kind of work that we have done, but that's something which is what they are. So through the experience, if I've just pull out few things which I learned over it as how relationship has been built, and a few examples. And the example that I'm going to talk about is a new relationship that we're going to start, and Sudarshan is right here. We have just inked an agreement to work in the area of health access. And what we realized that we started as a marketing program. In fact, just to take you back to this, we started saying that how do we increase access, which is distribution, which is packaging, is it pricing, what is it that? Then we suddenly realized that if we went around that, we are not talking of one dimension. We're actually talking of a complete business model that might be required. And this, I mean, we sent our proposal thinking what we wanted to do. Then he came back saying that, look, this is what we want to do. So it has taken some time to distill as to what both of us want to do, right? And this is something which is what we'll be embarking on a journey on developing business models. Now, the moment you say business models, it is not just marketing, and I think that's what it was, right? That while we call it marketing, which is access is quote unquote a marketing thing, but the solution may not lie in marketing. And therefore the biggest advantage that we have, resource we have, is we have faculty from other disciplines. So instead of looking at a marketing problem, we start looking at a business problem, which is what the industry looks at. That for them, it's not a marketing problem, it's not a finance problem. How do we look at it as a business problem? So, Sudarshan, this is exactly what we are saying, that the problem definition as to why do we want to get associated. So two things that's coming out from this is, one is we are looking at a larger issue, and it's very clear that it's not the benefit of just one firm, it's benefit for everybody, and therefore all of us gain. So that's something which is, and almost all the projects that we have done is getting into that, right? The other project that I'm working on, Suraksha we are working on that, is how brands get adopted by retailers who sell to rural or bottom of pyramid population. And this was something, the way we looked at it is that, let's say for example, India has about 6 million FMCG stores. Out of the 12 million stores that this country has, 50%, about 6 million, more than 50% are actually FMCG stores. And brands from this table of Unilever or P&G or a Dabur, which is a local company, reach to about 5.5 million of them. But out of those 5.5 million, only about 20% are actually accessed directly. 80% is through what you call as wholesalers, which means it's complete indirect distribution. Now, in a situation where you have indirect distribution, you don't even know who are these guys dealing. Forget about SKU level data, you don't have retailer data. As you're saying, it's hugely aggregate data that you have, right? So when we start working on it, and then we start sharing this with the companies, suddenly they realize that this is something which actually worries them also. So now we are getting partners on this, and although we start with FMCG, we're interested in the other FMCG product called SIM cards, phone charge cards. Those companies have shown interest to work with us. Phone companies start showing interest to us that can be associated with you on this. So definition of the problem, which is of a larger interest, suddenly attracts a lot of people. That's something which is one. But what we require, therefore, in order to have this also mutually interesting, the starting point is, I don't think it's corporation. Starting point is the individual. So how do we get a champion, right, in the organization? And in most cases that we have come across, it has been personal relationships that has been built over time. So either colleagues, us as colleagues who know somebody who can do that, we start discussing ideas and what it is. So which means we need a champion here at the institution to take the work. We also need a champion on the other side as an individual. Most of the experiences that we have had, when we start talking individual to individuals, by the time when we start talking institution to institution, by the time you make the institution talk, a lot of time actually passes by. So it starts as an individual to individual thing. And therefore we start with what you call small projects also many times, which might simply be writing cases. At IMA we use cases as our main pedagogy for teaching. So we start with writing cases. We start with getting these people into our classes to interact with students. So slowly, one by one, as I said, brick by brick, step by step, it starts getting built. And then the moment you have this person coming into your classrooms or in your activity, and they see it, and we go there and see, we start realizing the worlds, because we come from two different worlds. We start understanding the worlds of each other. And that's where you start then building bridges. That's something which is good. So essentially it is something which is, how do we build bridges, right? And therefore start, as you rightly said, and others have been also saying, how do you start talking a language which is understood by both? That doesn't mean that we water down all this thing. That doesn't mean that they need to be talking about constructs and phenomena. Like, for example, he would talk about a problem, or the industry people would talk about a problem, we'll talk about a construct or a phenomena to be studied. We would never meet. We would never meet. So the language that we start speaking is something that becomes very, very important. And which is what our experiences have been. That, and you rightly said, when we go and say market share, or when we say placements, we mean something else, they mean something else. So a whole lot of exchange is required. That is to be done. Some of the people who have actually been, and therefore when I go back to this thing of champions, and which is where I think alumni of the institution is a huge asset. We must all tap alumni for two reasons. Not because they have been alumni, not because they are facing problems, right? But they are, most of them would be, by the time, would be actually in a position to really concretize the problem for us many times. And therefore it's not money that we are talking of, it's actually saying that how do we actually work together and see something happen. And we have been very, very fortunate from that perspective. A large support has been coming from alumni, not just in terms of actually research support, but also in terms of teaching. Many of them actually come and teach in our programs, full courses, not just lectures, full courses. And that's where the association starts, and then you start having this. So alumni becomes one of the biggest assets for us. And these alumni not only come from the MBA programs, but also from the executive education programs. So how do we farm our own front yard in terms of really building association has been one of the key successes of whatever we have seen. At least I have seen, saying that how do we, our own resources of alumni, some people that we know of, one faculty knowing the other, it's a hugely, and this again I'm talking of completely experiences that I've had in the Asian context. It has been completely person to person. Maybe culturally that's what it is. But it is one-to-one is what essentially has been working. And we have been working in, here we are working in the Middle East, we are also working in some of the Far East countries. Japan is something that we have been talking to. And it's completely one-to-one. It's not institution to institution to start with. Therefore, I need champions, and alumni become one of the best champions from that perspective. Now, when we look at alumni, like him who has spent 20 years in the industry, you are at a position where you can take decisions. But when we look parallelly, when we look at executive education, we already have people who are already there at some position, and they would be interested. So, for example, just to take an example, we had a program 15, 20 years ago by a company which manages the field staff of the FMCG companies. Now, this company has a field staff of 14,000 foot soldiers, right? And using technology, they monitor the performance of these 14,000 people every 10 minutes. So they have sales data, attendance data, stock data, display data, competition data coming in every 15 minutes. Now, this is the kind of data that is available to us. And this is a South African company which is operating in this country. Now we are talking to them as to how do we associate with each other. And it's not that we work together, we did a small program from them, we did a workshop for them. From that, this idea is emanating because they saw the strength that we have, we saw the strength that they have. And their issue is exactly this that we're talking about. How do we use data? How do we mask data? We need to enter into an NDA, which is fine. We will enter into an NDA. That's not an issue. But how do we? So there's a resource out there which people have. Here we are. We want that resource. It's a question of how do we mine that. And in my opinion, the minors make the difference, not the tool, not just who has it. And as a faculty, therefore, it becomes very, very important for us also to, therefore, build relationship with people. I mean, wherever I have just gone and said, this is the project I'm doing, would you be interested? Everybody said, yes, we would be interested, but there has not been any response. But when you know there is somebody that you know or somebody who has shown interest, and interestingly, none of these projects have come by attending conferences. All these projects have come because you have worked with them, or they have worked with them, or they know you. That's something which is there. And therefore, institution becomes, or the association with the institution becomes a huge asset that all of us carry. So how do we leverage our own these things to build relationships? And one of the things that also happens that when you're either setting up a center or even taking initiative, how do you ensure that it doesn't die down as soon as you start or something which is there? Because everybody knows that money will be required for doing that. Everybody knows that academia requires money. But should I be asking money first? That's something which we know the whole relationship literature says that financial asking is the lowest level relationship that you will, which is transactional. And therefore, our experiences have been that we start at the top, saying that how do we associate together to bring something new to the world. And that excites, I think, everybody. I've not met any person in the corporate world who has said, let's not do new things. We just finished a study of, last year we finished a study of observing 6,000 shoppers in hypermarkets and 3,000 exit interviews, plus they were all video recorded. So we have about 400 hours of video recording. Now, when we all got this, I was ecstatic because that's the kind of data that you're looking for. But we had partnered with Ogilvy and Mather as advertising agency and TNS as a research agency. They were not excited. They said, what do I do with this data? So only when we developed an analytical tool which actually married the observation data, exit interview, and the videos together and did a dashboard. It's an Excel-based analytical tool which tells you how many people who picked bought, how many people who touched bought, which simply clearly showed that result orientation and concept orientation. How do you marry this? And that's something that is what you also said, that everybody is saying that. How do we make it happen? However, how do we look at a long-term relationship is what my take would be. Thank you.